The rain had been falling for 3 days straight, a persistent cold drizzle that turned the Virginia countryside into a gray, soggy blanket. Inside a massive hangar-like building at a naval special warfare base, the air was thick with the smell of wet canvas, sweat, and cordite. This was the crucible. Not the sandy, dusty hell of a foreign battlefield, but the final, brutal phase of selection for the most elite fighting force on the planet, the United States Navy SEALs. 22 men remained from an original class of over 150. They were the ghosts, the ones who had survived Hell Week, the constant running, the freezing surf, the bone-deep exhaustion. They were chiseled from granite and gristle, their faces gaunt with fatigue, but their eyes holding a fierce, unwavering flame. Among them, standing a little apart, was a man named Marcus. Marcus wasn't the biggest guy there. He wasn't the loudest either. While others boasted about their college wrestling championships or their Iron Man finishes, Marcus was quiet. He had a thoughtful look, a slight furrow between his brows that suggested he was always calculating, always observing. He had a wife back home, a tiny apartment, and a 2-year-old daughter he'd only seen in photographs for the last 8 months. This was his dream, his one shot to prove he belonged in the brotherhood. Today was the final evaluation. It wasn't a simple PT test. It was a complex, chaotic scenario designed to push them past their physical and mental breaking points. It was a test of leadership, of will, of the ability to think clearly when your body was screaming at you to stop. The instructors, battle-hardened veterans with chests full of medals and eyes that could strip paint, were like vultures, circling the exhausted men, looking for any sign of weakness. Chief Petty Officer Miller, a bear of a man with a voice like grinding gravel, was overseeing the final event. "All right, you sorry bunch of tadpoles," he roared, his voice echoing off the metal walls. "This is it, the final gut check. You're going to move this 50-foot inflatable boat from that end of the bay to the other. You'll carry it over your heads. You'll run with it. You'll crawl under it. And all the while, you'll be solving complex navigation problems given to you by your team leaders. Fail a navigation point, and the whole team does 50 burpees. On my command." The men, looking like drowned rats in their wetsuits, lifted the heavy rubber boat onto their heads. It was a familiar, hated weight. The team leader, a hyper-competitive former college athlete named Stark, immediately started barking orders. Let's go, pick up the pace! Martinez, get under that corner! Marcus, keep it steady!" They moved out into the rain, a clumsy, multi-legged beast struggling under its shell. For an hour they slogged through the mud, accessed the beach, and into the frigid water of the bay. The navigation problems were brutal, requiring them to stop, lower the boat, and huddle over waterproof maps while their muscles screamed in protest. Stark, under immense pressure, started making mistakes. He got flustered, shouting at the men for being too slow, too stupid. On the third navigation point, they failed. They were 50 meters off. 50 burpees! Miller's voice boomed from a nearby observation tower. Do it now! With groans of despair, the men dropped into the mud and started counting off the punishing exercise. Mud splattered their faces, their lungs burned. When they finished, they lifted the boat again, heavier now with the weight of failure. The tension was palpable. They were a team in name only, fractured by fatigue and Stark's abrasive leadership. The fourth navigation point was even harder. It required a precise calculation of distance and bearing while moving through a thickly wooded area. Stark, his confidence shattered, fumbled with the compass. The minutes ticked by. The other instructors, huddled under a makeshift shelter, watched with amusement. This was the part they loved to see, the breakdown. Finally, in frustration, Miller yelled from the observation post, "Stark, you're leading them in circles. For crying out loud, your navigator is right there. Hendricks, isn't it?" "The quiet one." "Stark, give him the map." Stark, humiliated, thrust the waterproof map case at Marcus. A few of the men, loyal to Stark, shot Marcus dirty looks. They saw him as a replacement, an outsider who was about to take over. A stocky man named Kowalski, a former Marine with a thick neck and a short fuse, muttered just loud enough for Marcus to hear, "Oh, great. Now we're really lost. What's he gonna do, read us a bedtime story?" A couple of others snickered, a low, ugly sound that cut through the rain. The laughter grew, fueled by stress and the desire for a scapegoat. It was a cruel, mocking sound. One of them, a wiry guy with a sharp tongue, called out, imitating a high-pitched voice, "Oh, please, Mr. Navigator, show us what you got, SEAL!" The words hung in the air. "Show us what you got, SEAL!" It was meant to be an insult. They were all candidates, none of them SEALs yet. The laughter was a challenge, a dismissal of Marcus's quiet competence. Marcus stopped. He slowly lowered his corner of the boat. The sudden shift in weight caused the others to stumble. He looked at the man who had spoken, then at Kowalski, his gaze calm and unhurried. He didn't look angry or defensive. Instead, a slow, easy smile spread across his face. It wasn't a smirk of arrogance or a grin of nervousness. It was a smile of pure, unadulterated confidence. It was the smile of a man who had just been handed the keys to the kingdom. The laughing men fell silent, confused by his reaction. Marcus turned to Chief Miller, who was watching the scene with narrowed, hawk-like eyes. "Chief," Marcus said, his voice steady and clear despite the rain and exhaustion, "request permission to address the team." Miller, intrigued by the quiet man's unexpected move, nodded once. "Granted." Marcus set the map case down on the boat's rubber tube, unzipped it, and pulled out the map. He didn't look at the men who had mocked him. He looked at each of the other 21 men, one by one, meeting their eyes. The rain dripped from the hood of his jacket. "All right," he began, his voice low but carrying. "Forget the navigation problem for a second. Forget the instructors. Forget being SEALs. Right now, we are 22 men who are very, very cold, very tired, and probably wondering why the hell we signed up for this." A few of them shifted, their resentment weakening. He wasn't lecturing them, he was speaking to them. "I have a daughter," he continued, his smile softening. "She just turned 2. Her name is Lily. She doesn't know what her dad does. She just knows that when he comes home, he gives her horsey rides on his back. I think about her every time I want to quit. Every time I think my legs can't carry me another step, I see her face." He paused, letting the image sink in. Each one of you has something like that. A reason you're here, standing in the rain, letting a bunch of sadistic instructors yell at you. For Stark, it's probably to prove he's the best. For Kowalski, it's because the Marines weren't hardcore enough. A quiet chuckle ran through the group. Kowalski's scowl didn't quite disappear, but his eyes softened slightly. "Right now, we're not a team. We're a bunch of guys holding the same boat, hating every minute of it, and that's okay. But to get through this last evolution, to get to the other side of this bay, we have to stop being 22 guys and start being one team. And a team works with what it's got." He picked up the map and pointed to their current location. "This is where we are, and the next point is here." He traced a route with his finger, a route that was completely different from the one Stark had been trying. "Stark had us going the long way around the deep water. That's the safe way. But the instructors don't want safe. They want to see if we can adapt. If we cut across this shallow inlet here, we shave off 400 meters. It means wading through waist-deep mud, but it's faster. It's harder, but it's better." He looked at Stark, who was standing rigid, his jaw tight. "Stark, you've been carrying this team on your back. You're a beast, but you don't have to do it alone. You call the shots. I just read the map. If you give the order, I can get us through this mud, and we can hit that navigation point in 15 minutes, not 30. It was a masterful move. He hadn't usurped Stark. He had empowered him. He had given Stark a way to save face while offering a solution that made the entire team's job easier. Stark stared at Marcus for a long moment. The challenge was there, but so was the respect. Stark gave a single, sharp nod. "All right, Hendricks, you heard the man. We're going through the mud. Kowalski, you take point on the left flank. Martinez, you're with me on the right. Let's move!" The change was instantaneous. The men lifted the boat with renewed energy. The grumbling stopped. As they moved, Marcus called out directions in a calm, steady voice. 10 more meters to the mud line. Okay, starting to sink. Keep the boat level. Good, good. You're doing great, Kowalski. You're a human tugboat. As they plunged into the thick, sucking mud of the inlet, the laughter that had mocked him was replaced by the sounds of effort and encouragement. Men grunted and heaved, but they were working together. When one man slipped, 2 others were there to grab him. When the boat started to tip, a chorus of voices yelled, "Steady! Steady!" and they righted it. Marcus's smile had ignited something. It wasn't just a route on a map, it was a belief that they could do it, that the impossible was just a problem to be solved. Up in the observation tower, Chief Miller watched through his binoculars. He turned to another instructor, a grizzled senior chief with a perpetual scowl. "See that?" Miller asked, a rare hint of admiration in his voice. The senior chief grunted. "The quiet ones are always the ones you have to watch. They're either the first to quit or the last man standing. That one's a leader." They emerged from the muddy inlet, covered head to toe in black, stinking muck, but they had shaved off the distance. They hit the navigation point with minutes to spare. The final obstacle was a low wall of concrete barriers. Exhausted, they had to get the 50-foot boat over it. It was the kind of task that usually ended in shouting and chaos. But now, something was different. The men instinctively looked to Marcus. He wasn't the appointed leader, but he was the compass. He didn't bark orders, he just started talking. "Okay, we don't lift it, we can't. We're too tired, we pivot it. We stand it on its end, use the wall as a fulcrum. Stark, Kowalski, you're the anchors on the bottom. The rest of us, on the count of 3, we push up from the sides." It worked. It was pure, simple physics applied by a mind that wasn't clouded by ego or panic. With a final collective heave, the boat slid up and over the wall, landing with a soft thud on the other side. The men fell over the barrier, collapsing in the mud, but this time, they were laughing. Not the mocking laughter from before, but a genuine, exhausted laugh of triumph. They had done it together. As they carried the boat the final yards to the end of the course, the rain finally began to let up. A weak, late-afternoon sun broke through the clouds, casting long, golden shadows across the training ground. The instructors stood in a line, clipboards in hand, their faces unreadable. The men set the boat down and stood at attention, a ragged, filthy, but unified line of warriors. Chief Miller walked slowly down the line, looking at each man. He stopped in front of Marcus. The rain had plastered his dark hair to his head, and his face was smeared with mud, but his eyes were clear and calm. Miller stared at him for a long, uncomfortable moment. The silence was deafening. Then, Miller's stone-cold face cracked. A corner of his mouth twitched, and he let out a short, sharp laugh. It wasn't a mocking laugh. It was a laugh of pure, disbelieving respect. He looked back at the other instructors. "You see that?" he asked them, pointing at Marcus. "You see that smile? The one he gave them when they were laughing at him? That right there? That's the weapon, gentlemen. That's the thing that wins battles." He turned back to the class. "You men have just completed the most difficult evolution in SEAL training, but you didn't complete it because you're the strongest or the fastest. You completed it because one of you," he looked directly at Marcus, "decided that instead of getting angry, he would get smart. He gave you a map, a plan, and a reason to stop being individuals and start being a team. That is what we are looking for. Not just fighters, leaders, problem solvers, men who can smile when the world is falling apart because they know they have the answer." Miller stepped back and addressed the entire group. "Effective immediately, you are all authorized to wear the trident. You are United States Navy SEALs. Welcome to the Brotherhood." The men erupted. They cheered, they hugged, they slapped each other on the back. They were no longer competitors. They were brothers, forged in the mud and the rain and the shared struggle. Stark walked over to Marcus.